On my birthday, the man I loved most stood in front of everyone and laughed at me, calling me a failure. Stay with me as I tell you exactly how that night unfolded. And if this story speaks to you, show some love by liking, sharing, and subscribing so you never miss more stories like this. It was supposed to be my special day. I had just turned 28, and my long-term boyfriend Darius had planned a small dinner with some of our closest friends. I thought it would be a warm celebration, filled with laughter, good food, and kind words. Instead, it turned into one of the most humiliating nights of my life. We were all seated around the table when Darius stood up, glass in hand. At first, I expected a sweet toast, something about love, memories, or how far we had come together. But instead, his words cut straight through me. "To my girlfriend Nia," he said with a smirk, "the only woman who can turn 28 and still have nothing to her name. No house, no car, no savings, but at least she has me." The table erupted with laughter. Some tried to cover their smiles with their hands, but I could see the amusement dancing in their eyes. My chest tightened, my cheeks burned, but I forced a small smile, pretending his joke didn't sting. Darius went on, not even noticing, or maybe not caring, how I shrank in my seat. I mean, really, what would she do without me? Probably be living in some tiny apartment eating noodles every night. His friends laughed harder. Even some of mine joined in, nodding and clinking glasses, as if this was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. I sat there in silence. My heart pounded, but I refused to let tears fall in front of them. I knew if I reacted, they would see it as proof that his words were true. So I pressed my lips together, gripping my napkin under the table until my knuckles turned white. Deep down, anger simmered. I wasn't the woman they thought I was. I wasn't the failure they laughed about. But I let them believe it. I let them laugh. I knew something they didn't. As the night dragged on, Darius kept cracking little jokes about how lucky I was to have a man like him take care of me. Each comment was another knife, and the people around me didn't stop him. They encouraged it. In their eyes, I was just the struggling girlfriend who should be grateful. I said nothing. I smiled when expected, nodded politely, and kept my thoughts to myself. Inside, though, I was burning. That night would not break me. That night would be the start of something else entirely. Because while they all saw a woman with nothing, I knew the truth. And one day soon, that truth would silence every laugh in that room. Growing up, my life was nothing close to easy. My mother worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, and I remember nights when the lights were cut off because we couldn't afford the bill. I wore secondhand clothes and learned early on how to stretch a single meal into 2. People used to look at me like I would never become anything more than the girl from the broken side of town. But what they didn't know was that every struggle was building a fire inside me. When my aunt passed away, she left me a piece of land. At first, it didn't look like much, a patch of soil nobody cared about on the edge of the city. People told me to sell it off for quick cash, but something inside me said to hold on. I researched, studied, and waited. When the city expanded, that land turned into gold. Developers came knocking, and instead of selling everything away, I partnered smartly. I learned about property management, about renting instead of selling, and about building long-term wealth. That decision changed my entire life. Slowly but surely, I built a business from the ground up. Apartment complexes, commercial rentals, and a few smart investments later, I had more money in the bank than I ever thought possible. I went from struggling to pay bills to managing millions. But I didn't tell anyone. I kept my lifestyle simple on purpose. Why? Because I wanted to know who loved me for me, not for what I had. Money attracts the wrong kind of people, the kind who smile at you only when your pockets are full. I wanted love that was pure, not bought. So, I kept the mansion hidden, the luxury cars parked away from sight, and the truth locked deep inside. But Darius was the type of man who could never see beyond what was in front of him. He constantly belittled me, telling me my dreams were too big for someone like you. He laughed whenever I talked about building a future. He thought small, and he wanted me to think small too. To him, I was just a dependent girlfriend, someone he could feel superior to. And that's exactly why I never corrected him. I let him believe his own lies, let him think I was desperate and broke. I stayed quiet at that birthday dinner, not because I was weak, but because I had a bigger plan. My silence was never surrender. It was strategy. I wanted him and everyone else at that table to underestimate me, to laugh, to call me a failure, to treat me like I was nothing. Because when the truth finally came out, their laughter would die in their throats. And Darius, the man who mocked me the loudest, would be the one left looking like the real fool. After the party, when the laughter had died down and the guests were gone, I thought maybe Darius would soften. Maybe he would notice how hurt I was and try to make things right. Instead, he looked at me with that smug smile of his, the one that always made me feel small, and said, "You should be grateful, Nia. A man like me sticking around for a loser like you? That's charity." The words sliced deeper than anything he had said in front of the others. Out there, I could pretend it was just a joke. But here, in the quiet of our apartment, there was no stage, no audience, just the truth dripping from his mouth like poison. My hands trembled, but I refused to let him see me break. He leaned back on the couch, scrolling on his phone like I was nothing more than background noise. "You know, I've been thinking," he added casually. "Tasha knows how to take care of a man. She dresses like she's worth something, carries herself like she belongs in high places. That's the kind of woman who fits my lifestyle. Tasha Monroe." The name itself made my stomach turn. I had seen her before, flashy jewelry, loud laugh, always flaunting something new on her arm. She was the kind of woman who lived for attention, who measured her worth in handbags and champagne bottles. And now, she was the woman Darius was comparing me to. "You don't even try, Nia," he continued, not even bothering to look up at me. "You just sit there with your little dreams, acting like one day things will change. They won't. Not unless you have a man like me to carry you. Honestly, sometimes I wonder why I'm still here." My chest felt heavy, and for a moment, I thought I might actually crumble under his words. But then something inside me shifted. It was like a quiet voice whispering, "This is not love. This is control." He hadn't been with me because he cared. He stayed because he thought I was beneath him, because mocking me made him feel taller. The realization burned, but it also cleared my mind. I thought back to every time he had dismissed me, every time he had laughed at my ideas, every time he had made me feel less than. None of it was love. It was power. And the truth was, I had allowed him to believe he had it. But not anymore. As he sat there, smirking at his phone, probably texting Tasha, I made a decision. My silence had served its purpose, but the time for quiet endurance was ending. I would not let him define me, not in public, not in private, not ever again. He thought I was powerless. He thought I was trapped. But soon he would learn that the woman he mocked as a failure was far stronger, and far richer, than he could ever imagine. One night, a few days after the party, I walked into the living room and noticed Darius's phone buzzing on the coffee table. He was in the shower, music blasting, and curiosity tugged at me harder than usual. Something in my gut told me to look, even though I knew what I might find would hurt. My hands shook as I picked up the phone and slid the screen open. What I saw made my stomach twist. There were dozens of messages to Tasha Monroe, each one more disgusting than the last. He bragged about me like I was some pathetic charity case. "Can't wait to dump her soon. She's dead weight. You and I, baby, will live the life I deserve." Another message read, "I'm done carrying her. She's just a poor example of what happens when a woman has no ambition. Watch how I end this." The worst part was how he talked about making me the center of another public joke. He wrote about inviting his friends out again, mocking me for being a dependent girlfriend with nothing to offer, and then finally cutting me off in front of everyone. He wanted my pain to be his entertainment, my humiliation to be his final show. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, and I had to sit down before I dropped the phone. Every memory of him holding me, every sweet word he had ever spoken, it all turned to ash in my mind. He had never loved me. He had only loved the power he thought he had over me. But while my heart ached, my mind sharpened. I took screenshots of every message, every plan, every insult. I sent them to my email, to a backup drive, to places he would never think to look. My fingers moved quickly, almost without thinking, as though the strength inside me had been waiting for this moment all along. I put the phone back exactly where it had been and leaned against the wall, listening to the water still running in the bathroom. He had no idea what I knew, and I wasn't going to let him find out until the timing was perfect. That night, lying beside him as he slept peacefully, I stared at the ceiling and made a promise to myself. The humiliation he served me on my birthday would not be the end of my story. It would be the beginning. He wanted a stage? I would give him one. But this time, the audience wouldn't be laughing at me. Quietly, I began to piece together a plan. Every lie, every betrayal, every careless word he had ever thrown my way would become fuel. I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't even warn him. My revenge would be calm, deliberate, and unforgettable. He thought he had broken me that night at the party. He had no idea he had only lit the fire that would burn down the world he built on my pain. I drove out of the city as the sun was dropping, tires whispering over the long stretch of road that led to the house nobody knew about. The gates slid open like a secret being revealed, and for a second I let myself breathe without measuring my smile. The mansion rose before me, glass walls catching the last light, clean lines, the kind of modern architecture people only see in magazines. It was mine. Quiet. Far from the gossip and the judgment and the people who thought they knew my worth. Inside, the space felt like someone had sculpted calm into rooms. There were wide, open spaces and tall windows that framed the trees. Designer furniture sat in careful arrangements that somehow still felt lived in. A sculpture I loved stood near the stairs. Paintings lined the hallway, bright and strange and expensive in ways I had stopped explaining. My cars sat in the garage the way trophies rest in a hall of victories. A Tesla with a low hum, and a Porsche whose leather smelled like long drives and late-night freedom. I parked and shut off the engine, listening to the sudden quiet that always felt like permission. I had learned to hide this life on purpose. When people asked where I lived, I laughed and changed the subject. When Darius mocked me about my tiny apartment, I let him believe it. It was a cost, keeping the truth tucked away, but it felt worth it. I had traded the small comforts of being admired for the larger peace of choosing who got to see me. There were nights I spent alone in this house, cooking simple food and sitting at the long kitchen island with a book, content with the silence. I kept my doors closed because open doors had once invited people who loved dollar signs more than they loved me. As I walked through the rooms, I thought about the reasons I had built this private world. It was a shield and a promise to myself. Proof that I belonged somewhere beyond the narrow expectations people tried to pin on me. My aunt's land had been the seed. Patience and a lot of late nights had helped it grow. I had seen what money did to people, and I had made a quiet rule. No parades, no announcements, no ostentatious displays. That rule was about protecting myself from vultures. Tonight, though, the rule felt heavy. The hurt from the birthday had not faded. The memory of Darius laughing, the room joining him, the smallness he had tried to impose on me, it burned again. I walked to the balcony and looked out over the property, the dark silhouette of trees cutting into the night. The mansion was beautiful, but beauty alone had never been my point. What mattered was control, my control. I set my phone on the table, the same phone I had used to gather proof, to save messages, to map out a plan. For years I had hidden here to avoid shallow friendships and fake smiles. Now I realized something different. Hiding had kept me safe, yes, but it had also kept my power private. That power was meant to be used. I moved through the rooms with a new steadiness. Tonight the mansion would stop being only a shelter. It would be a stage. The same walls that had protected me would witness the moment truth arrived. I imagined faces, their surprise, the sudden silence, and felt a small, satisfied warmth. I was done hiding from them. I would let the mansion speak, and when it did, nobody would laugh at me again. When I called Darius to tell him I wanted to host a dinner the following week, I kept my voice soft, almost shaky, like I was asking for his approval. I want to show you and our friends that I can do something nice, I said, letting a nervous laugh slip out. On the other end of the line, he chuckled, smug and certain. Finally, maybe you'll stop embarrassing me. Don't worry, babe, I'll be there. This should be good. I could almost hear him smirking through the phone, imagining how he'd use the night to put me down again. That was fine. Let him think it. His arrogance was my cover. Over the next few days, I played the role of the insecure girlfriend. I texted him things like, "Do you think everyone will come? And I hope they won't laugh at me this time." Each time, he reassured me in that patronizing way of his, feeding off the idea that I was desperate for his approval. He had no idea he was walking straight into the trap I was setting. Behind the scenes, I made the real arrangements. I contacted one of the best private chefs in the city, a man whose waiting list was longer than most weddings take to plan. I hired servers dressed in crisp uniforms, a sommelier who knew more about wine pairings than anyone at that table could pretend to, and a pianist whose music could make even silence feel elegant. My mansion would become more than a home that night. It would become a stage, and every detail would shine a spotlight on the truth I had been hiding. I walked through the house with the staff, pointing out where the tables should go, how the candles should be arranged, and which cars in the garage should be moved to the driveway. The Porsche gleamed under the lights, the Tesla hummed when I turned it on, and I felt a quiet thrill imagining the look on their faces when they pulled up to the gates. At night, when Darius called to tease me about how I better not burn the food, I bit my lip to stop myself from laughing. If only he knew. He thought he was coming to a cramped apartment where I'd serve overcooked pasta and hope for a compliment. Instead, he'd walk into a life so far beyond his imagination that his pride would crumble before the first course was even served. The night before the dinner, I stood in the middle of my dining room, running my hand along the polished wood of the long table, picturing every seat filled. I could already see their shock, the way their laughter would die in their throats. I had stayed silent long enough. Now the stage was set, the pieces in place. Darius thought he was coming to laugh at me again. But this time, the laughter would not be his. The evening arrived, warm and heavy with the kind of anticipation only I truly understood. One by one, my guests gathered at the pickup point Darius had suggested, all of them expecting a ride to my tiny apartment. I had arranged something different. When the sleek black chauffeur cars pulled up instead, their eyes widened in confusion. "Wait, this is for us?" one of Darius's friends asked, half laughing, half unsure. The driver opened the door with a polite nod and confirmed their names, as though they were VIPs heading to an exclusive event. They climbed inside, still whispering and giggling about how extra I must have been trying to be. None of them had any idea. As the cars rolled through the city and out toward the hills, the chatter turned uneasy. The drive stretched longer than they expected, past neighborhoods they couldn't afford, into streets lined with estates hidden behind iron gates. Finally, when the car turned toward my property, the tall gates slid open to reveal the sweeping driveway. The mansion rose ahead, glowing in the soft wash of evening lights, glass and steel gleaming like a promise. Their laughter fell silent. Mouths hung open. The Porsche sat parked out front, polished to perfection. The Tesla was beside it, subtle but impossible to ignore. Landscaped gardens stretched along the driveway, and staff members waited in crisp uniforms at the entrance. Each guest was greeted by name as though they belonged to some exclusive circle. I had planned every detail to perfection, and the effect was intoxicating. Their confusion rippled into awe, then disbelief. "No way," someone whispered under their breath. Another guest nudged Darius, his voice low but mocking. "I thought you said she was broke?" I saw it then. The flicker in Darius's eyes, the split second of panic before he straightened his shoulders and plastered on a grin. "Yeah, well, she must have rented this place for the night," he said quickly, loud enough for others to hear. "You know Nia, always trying too hard." His words were sharp, but his voice cracked on the edge of them. He was scrambling, trying to keep his grip on the story he'd built. I stepped into view at the top of the stairs, the soft silk of my gown catching the light, diamonds glinting at my wrist. Every eye turned toward me, and I let the silence hang for a moment. Calm, poised, I descended slowly, heels clicking against marble, every movement deliberate. "Welcome," I said, my voice even, carrying across the entryway. "I'm so glad you all could make it tonight." Their stares followed me, their minds spinning to reconcile the woman they had mocked with the one standing before them now. Darius swallowed hard, his smile faltering as the walls of his lies began to close in. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the girl hiding her truth. I felt powerful, unshaken, and fully in control. Tonight, the game had changed, and I was the one holding all the cards. Dinner began with the sound of soft jazz floating through the air, the clinking of crystal glasses, and the aroma of a perfectly prepared 5-course meal. Nia sat at the head of the long mahogany table, poised and serene, her wine glass catching the golden light of the chandelier. Around her, Darius and their circle of friends shifted uneasily in their seats, some whispering under their breath, others sneaking glances at the towering walls of art and the opulent decor. Nobody could reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the commanding figure in front of them. Darius forced a laugh, trying to break the tension. "Well, Nia, this is impressive. Didn't know you had this side to you." His words dripped with mockery, but his voice cracked just enough to betray his unease. Nia didn't flinch. She set her glass down and folded her hands neatly on the table. "There's a lot you didn't know, Darius. A lot I chose not to share, because I was protecting myself from people who never had my best interests at heart." Her eyes swept over the group, lingering on Darius just long enough to make him squirm. The first course arrived, plated with precision by the private chef. The friends murmured their appreciation, too polite or too stunned to say much else. As they ate, Nia began to peel back the layers of her hidden life. She spoke calmly, without arrogance, detailing the businesses she had built over the years. An interior design firm with celebrity clients, a property management company handling luxury rentals across the city, and an art investment portfolio that had tripled in value. I kept it all quiet, she continued, her voice steady, because I learned early on that when people think you have nothing, you see their true colors. And when they believe you're successful, suddenly everyone wants a piece. Darius shifted in his chair, his fork clattering against the porcelain plate. You're exaggerating. I would have known if any of this was real. Nia smiled thinly, reaching for a sleek folder beside her chair. She opened it slowly, like turning the final page of a novel, and revealed crisp documents. Property deeds, business registrations, bank statements. She slid them across the table for anyone who cared to look. Everything I've said is backed up right here. No exaggerations, Darius. Just truth. A silence fell over the room, heavy and undeniable. Then Nia lifted her phone, projecting screenshots onto the large screen in the dining hall. Messages lit up the room. Darius texting Tasha about dumping Nia soon, mocking her as a burden, boasting about how he would trade up. Gasps rippled around the table. Darius' face flushed crimson. Those are out of context. No, Darius. Nia cut him off, her tone sharp but controlled. There's no context where bragging about cheating is innocent. The friends who once laughed at Nia now stared at her with newfound respect, and at Darius with disgust. His credibility shattered, his lies exposed, and his mask ripped away. Darius sat speechless as Nia leaned back in her chair, calm as ever. The tables had turned, and everyone knew it. The dining room had grown impossibly still, the only sound the faint clinking of silverware as the last plates were cleared away. Candlelight flickered against the polished glass walls, casting elegant shadows across the table where Darius sat stiffly, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists. Around him, the same friends who once jeered at Nia were now whispering to one another, their tones reverent, their eyes darting toward her with awe. Nia rose slowly, her gown flowing like liquid silk, every movement deliberate and regal. She placed both palms lightly on the table, leaning forward just enough for her words to slice through the silence. Darius, she said softly, do you remember my birthday? Do you remember standing in front of these same friends, calling me useless, calling me a burden, a failure? Darius shifted, forcing a hollow laugh. Nia, come on, that was just... She raised a hand, and the room froze again. No, don't try to rewrite it. You mocked me when you thought I had nothing. You built your pride on tearing me down. Tonight, I want you to look around. She gestured to the gleaming chandeliers, the polished marble floors, the rows of luxury cars visible through the glass. And tell me, who is the real failure now? Gasps escaped from a few friends at the sharpness of her words. The weight of them lingered, pressing down on Darius like a stone. His mouth opened, but no defense came. The proof of his betrayal, his own messages, his false bravado, it was all laid bare. Nia straightened, her eyes never leaving his. This is my home. My life. Built with my hands, my vision, and my determination. And you thought you could reduce me to a punchline. You thought you could use me as your example of weakness. But tonight, you are the example. Her voice hardened. Get out of my house. The staff, who had been standing silently along the walls, stepped forward without hesitation. Two well-dressed men approached Darius, waiting for him to stand. He sputtered, his voice breaking. You can't just throw me out like some. But Nia cut him off with a calm finality. I can. And I am. Tasha, seated 2 chairs away, folded her arms and looked away, her face burning red. Don't look at me, she muttered as Darius turned toward her desperately. You dragged me into this mess. I'm not saving you. The friends who had once laughed at Nia avoided Darius' gaze entirely. Instead, they murmured words of praise to her. Nia, you're incredible. We should have never doubted you. I'm so sorry for the way I treated you. Darius rose at last, his pride cracked, his reputation shredded. The staff escorted him to the towering doors of the mansion. He looked back once, his eyes hollow, but Nia had already turned away, her composure unshaken. That night, the man who called her a failure walked out in silence, while the world finally saw who had truly won. The house had finally grown quiet. The last of the guests had gone, their voices still echoing in the hallways with apologies and admiration, but now only silence remained. Nia sat in her study, a glass of deep red wine cradled in her hand. The fire crackled gently in the corner, its glow reflecting off the glass walls that overlooked her estate. For the first time in years, She felt no heaviness in her chest, no need to explain herself, no urge to defend her worth. Tonight, her life had spoken for her. She leaned back in the leather chair, closing her eyes for a moment. Darius' words replayed in her mind, not with pain anymore, but with clarity. The insults, the mocking laughter, the way he had made her believe she should feel small. For so long, she had carried those cuts quietly, thinking that silence was weakness. But tonight had proved the opposite. Her silence was strategy. Her patience was power. And her truth had been the sharpest revenge of all. She swirled the wine slowly, her lips curving into the faintest smile. Darius had left her house humiliated, exposed for what he really was. He wanted control, but he had none. He wanted wealth, but he had none. He wanted status, but he had none. Everything he had tried to strip away from her only shone brighter when she revealed who she truly was. She thought of the look on Tasha's face, the way their friends shifted uncomfortably when the reality sank in. They had laughed at her once. Tonight, their laughter had turned into shame. They saw her not as the quiet, broke woman Darius painted her to be, but as the woman who had built her own empire and chose not to flaunt it. Taking another sip, she whispered to herself, "The sweetest revenge is never anger. It's freedom." And she meant it. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't begged him to stay, hadn't wasted her energy proving her worth. She simply let her life, her success, her peace, stand in the light. Finishing the last drop of wine, she placed the glass down and rose from her chair. The night was far from over. She slipped into her black silk coat, picked up the keys from the marble counter, and stepped outside. The cool night air kissed her skin as the lights of her mansion glowed behind her. Her Porsche waited in the driveway, sleek and gleaming under the moonlight. Sliding into the driver's seat, she adjusted the mirror and caught her own reflection. No tears. No anger. Just a calm, steady smile. The engine roared to life, powerful and smooth, and she steered onto the open road toward the city lights. Every mile carried her farther from Darius, from the weight of his cruelty, from the years of hiding who she was. Nia smiled quietly to herself. Her best revenge wasn't the humiliation she had given him. It was the life she was living now, and the life she would keep living beautifully, freely without him. Do you think Nia made the right choice by exposing Darius and walking away for good, or should she have given him another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd really love to hear them. And if stories like this inspire you, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one.